Hello and welcome back to another popcorn chat. As you can see, I'm not alone in this video. I've got David from Well Good Movies here with me, and we're going to talk about the latest release, Wonka. Now, we've literally just got out of seeing this film, and we just wanted to give you guys our thoughts, good, bad, everything in between. So let's get into the review. So I guess my first question, David, is what was your initial thoughts seeing this film?
I think, it's interesting thoughts going into before the film, so how that influences it, and the fact that Paul King was involved in it give me a lot more faith. I think if he wasn't the director of this film, I would have seen it as much more of a cash grab than it actually is. And I think the more that I read about, I don't usually look at reviews in depth, but I might just look at a few like sort of lines or what's the general consensus. And hearing there was like a full-blown musical, I guess that almost give me more faith that they seem to be going with something more creative, more bold, rather than just do some crazy prequel story in which it's like the dark story you never knew about Willy Wonka or something like that. So I had a good time. I like Paul King's like humor. Obviously, he's been involved in a lot of British comedies, as we'll talk about. So yeah, I think that the comedy really worked for me. I think the performances are probably the highlight for me. I think the casting was just on point, really.
Yes, yeah.
I think the casting was really perfect.
Yeah, I mean, exactly what you said about the trailer, like it never said that it was a musical. So I think a lot of people were surprised by that. But if you look at the other Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Willy Wonka films, they've all got songs in them. So you can kind of guess that there's going to be songs along the way. But it was interesting to see Paul King do this one. Obviously, it's delayed Paddington 3, which I know we're all upset about. But yeah, it's interesting to see his spin, like I said, not on an adaptation, but rather an original story, which is always nice to see. Because I was worried at first. I was like, oh no, this is going to be another Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. But no, this is something a little bit different. So yeah, it's pretty exciting.
We were saying before recording about how sometimes Olivia Colman, obviously she's Oscar-winning actress. So a lot of times now she's in very serious roles, which are very fitting for her. She's able to do drama very well, but also comedy very well. But because she comes from a comedy background, like I was first introduced to her through Mitchell and Webb and those kind of like TV shows. Yeah, exactly. And it feels right for her to be in that space. And I think in the past when she has been in films like Hot Fuzz, etc., she's just a smaller part. So she's fantastic to see her have like quite a big relevant role in the film. I think Timothée Chalamet does a good job. I think the fact he's playing a young Wonka does help, because obviously he is a younger actor. I think it would be very difficult to do a Charlie and the Chocolate Factory adaptation and make him Wonka and buy into that when he's so young. But I think he does the kind of like whimsical kind of like dreamer element of him quite well. I don't think they could do a kind of more sinister version like he is in the book or in other films. So he fits the Wonka they want him to be in this film and this story. So I think, he was very good. And yeah, the entire cast, I think like the villains are very good. Matt Lucas, I really enjoyed. And you could tell that they were it was like a pantomime sort of performance. Everyone was, there was like a scene with the villains where they were sort of sat in this room, and Matt Lucas, and I'm not sure the other actor's
Matthew
name.
Bainton and the other guy from Peep Show.
Yes, Matthew Bainton. They sort of, even though two other characters are talking, they're like flipping back, looking at each other, like giving each other scowls and stuff. So it was nice that like they continued to do little fun tidbits, even when the dialogue
isn't on them.
Exactly, yes. So, and the fact that like when he eats one of the chocolates, he goes cockeyed, and so like raspberry and all this kind of thing. So I think it was that type of stuff which I think Paul King so really influences in his style and his directing, which really helps.
Yeah, I mean, I really liked, like say, the sort of the ensemble, especially of like a lot of British actors. There's a lot of like comedians in this. That was really surprising. I was like, David, that's from so and so from that TV show. Like, there was so many appearances. We even had a lot of American. Obviously, we had, is it Michael Keel from America? So yeah, we had a lot of cameos, and every time someone came on screen, it was just so nice to see. I feel like it's our kind of generation of comedy as well. So
and that does happen in the Panther films. You're like, this guy's in it. Oh, it's them. Yeah. So again, Paul King seems to sneak in as many as he can.
And obviously with this one, he was writing with Simon Farnaby, who's in Horrible Histories, Ghosts. And I think that comes through in the comedy writing as well. And obviously Matthew Bainton's in it from Horrible Histories. So I think that's why there's so many comedic actors in this, which obviously I love about the Paddington films as well.
I felt once Hugh Grant came in, who's also great. Like when's Hugh Grant not good?
Yeah.
And just his mannerisms and his delivery, the way that he does the lines, he's fantastic. I think the CG there for me didn't work quite as well. I felt that I was looking at a kind of just CG makeup, which I'm not as fussed on. The size and stuff of him works really well. But it's just the fact that to me, the film seemed like it was really original and all the songs were their own until then Hugh Grant comes in and they go, right, now let's bring in the Gene Wilder stuff and let's bring in that song. And I was like, oh, I kind of taken out to this film now, and now I feel I'm watching a prequel to that film rather than an original.
Yeah. I was going to sort of go on to the music, but like you said, there's a lot of original score in this, but then there is that sort of, this little melodies from the 1971 film, which is interesting. Like you say, for yourself, it kind of drew you out. Some people think, oh, it's nostalgia. But I think I would have liked more separation between that. And there was lots of nods as well in the performances from Timothy.
Yeah.
Certain phrases he used, the little whistle thing that Hugh Grant's character had, like walking down the steps, walking back up. I was like, oh my God, these are little nods to the original, which I loved. But at the same time, you're like, oh, I know what you're trying to do with any prequel sort of film. Yeah. So that kind of drew me out a little bit. Yeah,
I feel you could have still like had the flute whistle, for example, but just not make him green and orange or something like that. Yeah. Like, I think the fact that the Tim Burton film still did successful and still embedded in pop culture, I think you can still adapt it your own way each time and just play kind of loose with it.
Did you have any favourite songs? Can you remember any of them? Like, were they that impactful?
That's the thing, probably if I like went back to the soundtrack, I probably would start to pick out some, but I think they are quite, not so much Greatest Showman-esque in the sense of like the style, but they're Greatest Showman-esque in the sense of like, which is good for musicals, is that they all seem to
have this grand scale, don't they, with the dancers?
They very much flow together. It's not kind of like, here's this style song, here's this style song. It kind of seemed, I could imagine something like that on stage, on like
I
Les
thought
Mis,
that,
for example, is like Les Mis does quite well of like, you don't sort of pick out one or two songs, they all just kind of flow into the next because the style is so similar.
Yeah.
So I felt there was a bit like that. I felt that the style run throughout there. And it was kind of toe tapping. There was a lot of fun stuff. I did like when the villains were doing their song, the like Scrub with the Willie's friends was quite fun as well. And that probably was Hugh Bonneville, I think. Is that? Oh no, that's the other guy.
That's Paddington.
And he's also in Downton Abbey.
Yes.
But the butler,
the other guy.
I think it's funny that he is singing that, you know, the scrub, and then the fact it gets brought back later when
like reprise of certain songs.
So the dog comes in and then they're like scrub, and
they're like, well, we don't normally sing, or we don't change the lyrics. It's very self-aware. I think one of my favorite ones, I can't remember the name of it, but they're talking about chocolate and they were rhyming things with chocolate. It was like, it went across all the characters from Wonka to the villains. Like, I can't remember it.
There's a lot of ways of saying chocolate in this film. Like Timothy Chalamet says it quite weird at times. The villains, like there's one part in which a villain says like death by chocolate, and then there's like chocolate, or you know, like there's a lot of fun playfulness with words and rhyming which happens. I felt there was a lot of great gags and a lot of stuff to just kind of like laugh at, which wasn't laugh out loud funny. There was, you know, a lot of moments which were
I heard you laugh out loud at one point.
But it's just the fact that peppered throughout, there was still moments which were more like small smiles, smirk moments. So there was a good balance. It was funny throughout. Probably, Olivia Colman's scene with, is it?
With Tom Davis?
Yes.
Yeah, when he's like in the sort of lederhosen.
Yes, that was great. God. Yeah. So, and also probably the stand-up for me is the security guard at the zoo when he was going through the entire...
Yeah, Simon Farnaby, one of the writers.
That's it, yeah. So when he was going through the whole stages of eating a chocolate
on a night out, I think we could really appreciate a lot of the adult jokes. Obviously we had a lot of kids in our sort of screenings, very sort of family oriented screen, and there was me and David, and then so it's like interesting. We were definitely laughing the loudest. I think maybe it was more the mature jokes, but
still a bit unsure about like how his mum is like Irish and then he's like American as well.
Where's the dad we've seen in the Tim Burton film? Exactly. Like, where's that connection?
Well, that's why I was kind of glad again that that's the more playing loose with it kind of thing. Like, well, that film has told that story, so if you wanted to, you could still headcanon maybe that he goes and lives with his dad after his mum died or something. I don't know. And then he travels the world, as he said. So which happens in this film. But I think that it was still clear that the casting there was, you know, done for, you know,
Sally
specific.
Hawkins obviously being back
Yes.
from Paddington.
So
I think the little kid was like, oh, that's Paddington's mum.
Yeah, so she's like a great actress for, again, pulling on the heartstrings. The final act wasn't quite as big and triumphant as it could have been, I think.
Yeah.
I felt it was quite, maybe not low key, but it was quite, oh, all right, it's just that, you know, it wasn't like this big spectacle moment, but it did still do a good job of tying in a lot of what they had built up before. But I guess I was just, surprised that there wasn't like bigger stakes to the ending. It was kind of, and the way it was kind of resolved was quite simple. To me, what I do appreciate about the older films, and I'm not sure if this film was trying to kind of reflect that in the story with the mother and the chocolate bar, but the idea that it's just, I never felt like it was about chocolate. It seemed to me like that's probably my biggest issue with it, is they just seemed like magic. Like there was times in which he had the little pop-up factory and he was like, try a chocolate. And this girl who's never tried chocolate tries something which is like a cloud with a lightning bolt. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. That's not chocolate. That looks like a Harry Potter kind
futuristic
of
or sci-fi.
So, and the fact that like the first one that he introduces to people to is like a flying one. And then when he opens his shop, there's like flowers everywhere and there's like cotton candy and stuff like that. And I was like, but where's the actual bars? Where, you know, I think there was an element to the film in which he was like maybe with his mum that he thought bring it back to the roots, and that's where the splitting up the chocolate bar
maybe
comes into it. But I felt that could have been told in a better way. I think it could have run throughout the film. I think especially because you don't even see the competitors' products. Even all of them seem to be like kind of balls of chocolate and stuff. I'm like, you know, there's still the scrumdiddlyumptious bar and all that kind of stuff. Like, where's the bars of chocolate? Where's the, you know, the...
Yeah. You just see the little sort of truffles, don't you, when they're sort of handed, but I think that's about it.
But everything to me just seemed to be, it's magic, you know, and I'm like, to me, Willy Wonka, Charlie Chocolate Factory has never been about that. There is a line, which I guess we would get to in one of the other films, which is about the kind of elaborateness and magicalness of it. But to me, the other films have always kind of rooted it still in terms of, it's ridiculous and crazy, but it's still just a magical product. But this seemed to go a bit too far in terms of just being like, oh, it's just make-believe and people can just fly around if they want to. Whereas in the other films, it was kind of like, it just makes a big bubble or it makes like, you can have a 3-course dinner. It wasn't something that would actually cause you to fly off and things like that.
True.
That's probably my biggest issue. But again, that's to me why this film kind of works as a kind of Disney Greatest Showman-esque musical, whimsical time. But is it like a Roald Dahl film? Perhaps not, you know, because again, this is like a very happy, cheery cast of characters, which often Roald Dahl characters
there's normally tragedy in a lot of Roald Dahl things like I'm thinking like The Witches. And
and Olivia Colman's probably your closest representation of that like horrible villain.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I agree on the sort of imagination side that you're saying there, David. Like it does feel a bit more of a spectacle for like the other films do, for more grounded. And then the other thing I kept thinking was like the time period this film's set in. So obviously what we sort of know in the other films, well, one's set in the 70s, one's set in the 2000s. Like, when is this set? Because sometimes it feels like the 1940s. Sometimes it feels like Victorian or even earlier, like with the outfits and then but there's like 40s cars. I'm just like, when is this set? And I don't know if that's supposed to be the point of it. It's supposed to be kind of ambiguous, but I think that's sort of world building that sometimes lost me in when this film was set. But no, generally it was all really positive, to be honest. I think it's got rewatchability. I would watch it again. I think it's got that Paddington effect. Watch it at Christmas. I think it's like the perfect time to drop it at Christmas. But I wish they dropped some merch as well with this one. Where's the chocolate in the stores?
Exactly, that's the thing. It's because they haven't made the bars in the film. That's
they'll probably see little lightning bolts and clouds, but not an actual chocolate bar. So what would you give this film out of 5 then, David?
5. Usually I am thinking about my ratings as I'm watching something for Letterboxd, stuff like that, but I didn't think about it.
We haven't had time to log this on Letterboxd.
No, exactly.
We're just going straight into it.
I would probably give it a solid 4 if I was saying that in just in terms of how much enjoyment I got out of it.
I mean, I was thinking about the same. I was thinking of 4. Just on first watch, pure enjoyability, magical wonder. But you could start picking it apart if we really sat here for 2 hours and started analysing everything. I think of 4. When I was watching, I was comparing it to Barbie in my head. It's like, what other big blockbuster have I seen that, you know, has been like a 5-star this year. And for me, it's Barbie. And I was like, I think I enjoyed Barbie more. So that was my kind of
I would agree.
sort of spectrum that I was looking upon. So
Also a film that probably does a better job of mixing that practical and CG, because I never watched Barbie and thought this is CG. So I think that they have a good effect of like Barbie Land, which is obviously large, a big part of it is physical, but there's obviously the backgrounds and stuff as CG. So I think that this film could have had a bit more of that, like you said. So
so both pretty high scores, really.
Yeah.
So there you have it. There's our Wonka review. Let me know if you've seen the film down below in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're now going to talk a little bit more about the other 2 films in a separate video. So if you want to see that, make sure you subscribe and keep up to date with any new releases. Hope you guys have enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next review.